My dear students, welcome to Jnana Taranga CET coaching classes for medical and NEET entrance examination 2018-19 conducted by Department of Pre-University Education, Karnataka. Myself, Suresh Babu. Today I am going to explain you about second PUC physical chemistry chapters, solid state and solutions. Coming to the first chapter, the solid state. See, matter is nothing but anything which occupies some space and having some mass. It mainly exists in three states: solids, liquids and gases. Now we are going to discuss about solids. Solids have different shape and different volume. These solids are mainly divided into two types: crystalline solids and amorphous solids. The basic difference among these are shape, arrangement of the particles, melting point, cleavage property, heat of fusion, anisotropy and their nature. Crystalline solids have definite geometric shape, whereas amorphous solids are not having definite geometric shape. Crystalline solids have long range orders, whereas amorphous solids are not having long range orders. Crystalline solids have sharp melting points, amorphous solids are not having sharp melting points. Crystalline solids undergo clear cleavage when cut with a sharp edge, whereas amorphous solids does not undergo clear cleavage when cut with a sharp edge. Crystalline solids are having definite heat of fusion, whereas amorphous solids are not having definite heat of fusion. Crystalline solids are anisotropy, whereas amorphous solids are isotropic in nature. Crystalline solids are true solids, whereas amorphous solids are super cold liquids. And come to the next one, types of crystalline solids. Crystalline solids are mainly classified into four types: molecular solids, ionic solids, metallic solids and covalent or network solids. If you see, molecular solids are further divided into three types: non-polar molecular solids, polar molecular solids and hydrogen bond molecular solids. In molecular solids, the constituent particles are molecules. The attractive forces between the molecules are either London forces or dipole-dipole forces or hydrogen bonding. And these molecular solids are generally soft in nature, except that hydrogen bonded solids which are hard. They possess low melting points. They are bad conductors of electricity. Ionic solids contains the constituent particles ions. These are attracted by Coulombic attractive forces. They are hard and brittle and they possess high melting points. These are bad conductors in solid state but good conductors in solution and molten state. Metallic solids contains the constituent particles are metal ions. These are held by metallic bonding. These are hard but malleable and ductile. They have moderate to high melting points. These are good conductors of heat and electricity. In covalent solids, the constituent particles are atoms which are bonded by covalent bonds. These are hard. They have very high melting points. These are insulators except graphite, which is a good conductor of electricity. So this is regarding different types of crystalline solids. Come to the next one, unit cell. Unit cell is the smallest repeating unit of the crystalline lattice, having the shape of the crystal, which when repeated in three dimensions which gives the crystal lattice. And this unit cell can be characterized by two parameters. One is side, another is angle between the sides. These sides are generally represented by A, comma, B and C, and angles are represented by alpha, beta and gamma. And we are having mainly four types of unit cells. They are primitive, body centered, face centered and end centered. The primitive unit cell contains the constituent particles only at corners. Body centered cubic lattice contains constituent particles at corners and body center. Face centered unit cell contains the constituent particles at corners and face centers. The edge center unit cell contains the particles at corner and any two opposite edge centers. These are the four types of unit cells. Coming to the crystal systems, there are mainly 7 types of crystal systems, and these 7 types of crystal systems contains 14 types of crystal lattices, what we call them as Bravais lattices. If it is a cubic system, the parameters are A is equal to B is equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma is equal to 90, and this cubic system contains three types of unit cells: primitive, body centered and face centered. The second one is tetragonal system. The parameters are A is equal to B is not equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma is equal to 90. This contains two types of lattices: simple and body centered. The orthorhombic system. The parameters are A is not equal to B is not equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma is equal to 90. This contains four unit cells: simple, body centered, face centered and end centered. Next one, hexagonal crystal system. This contains only one type of lattice, and the parameters are A is equal to B not equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to 90, whereas gamma is equal to 120. And next one, monoclinic. The monoclinic parameters are A is not equal to B is not equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma is equal to 90, but beta is not equal to 90. This contains two types of lattices: simple and end centered. Next one, trigonal. The parameters are A is equal to B is equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma, which is not equal to 90. This contains only one type of lattice. And last one is triclinic. A is not equal to B is not equal to C, alpha is not equal to beta is not equal to gamma is not equal to 90. So these are total 7 types of crystal systems which contains 14 types of lattices. Out of these, the most symmetric is cubic system, the most unsymmetric is triclinic system, whereas orthorhombic system contains more number of types of lattices. This is regarding types of Bravais lattices. Come to the next one, the contribution of the particles present in the unit cell. Corner. There are 8 corners for a cubic system, and the contribution of each particle is 1 by 8. 2 face centers, contribution of each particle is 1 by 2. 4 edge centers, and contribution of each particle is 1 by 4. Body center, total particle belongs to unit cell. And coming to the number of atoms per unit cell in the cubic lattice, come to primitive unit cell. This contains 8 particles, 8 corners, and the contribution is 1. Face center unit cell. This contains 8 corners and 6 face centers. The contribution of corner particles is 1 and face center particles is 3. Total is 4. Body centered unit cell. This contains 8 corners whose contribution is 1 and 1 body center whose contribution is 1, and the total number of particles in the unit cell is 2. And coming to the next one, the close packing of the constant particles in 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimensions. Here what the diagram shown here. So these are the close packing in 2 dimensions. Coming to this first one, this first one shows the 2-dimensional square close packing. If you observe here, one constant particle is surrounded by 4 constant particles. So the coordination number of the particle is 4. Coming to the second types of crystal system, if one-dimensional pattern arrangement over that, another layer is placed in such a way that the depressions of the first layer is covered, then we can get this type of arrangement. This is called as a hexagonal close packing. In this hexagonal close packing, this is one constant particle. This constant particle is surrounded by 6 constant particles. So the coordination number of the particle is nothing but 6. So overall, for 2-dimensional square close packing, the coordination number is 4. For 2-dimensional hexagonal close packing, the coordination number is 6. Come to the next one. This is the arrangement of constant particles in 3 dimensions. Over the 2-dimensional hexagonal close packing, if we place second layer in the depressions of the first layer, then this is the type of arrangement what we will get. And here if you observe, 2 types of voids is present. One is represented as T, another is represented as O. T represents tetrahedral void, O represents octahedral void. So the tetrahedral void is obtained here when 3 layers of one sphere are covered with one sphere of the next layer. This type of void is called as a tetrahedral void. And second type of void is octahedral void. This type of octahedral voids are obtained when 2 triangular voids having the vertex in opposite direction of the 2 layers are in contact with each other. At the center what the void place is present here, this is called as octahedral void. These are the 2 types of voids, tetrahedral voids and octahedral voids. And coming to this another diagram, this is the 3-dimensional arrangement of the constant particles. See, this middle one indicates the arrangement of the second layer over the first layer in the depressions of the first layer in order to cover the depressions. Now, over this second layer, you can place third layer in two ways, in order to cover the tetrahedral voids and in order to cover the octahedral voids. If you place the third layer, see this diagram, in this I have placed this third layer in order to cover the tetrahedral voids of the second layer, then the third layer is exactly similar to first layer, which is observed here in this diagram. This is the first layer, this is the second layer, and this is the third layer. This third layer and first layer are exactly similar to each other. That means two layers are repeated here, which is called as AB-AB type close packing. This is nothing but a hexagonal close packing. Now come to this diagram here. In this, in the octahedral voids of the second layer, third layer is placed. So this third layer is not coincide either with the first layer or second layer, which is entirely different from both the layers. And over this third layer, we can place one more layer that can coincide with the first layer. So here three layers are repeated, which is called ABC type arrangement. And this type of close packing gives cubic close packing or face-centered cubic lattice. See the same in one more also you can difference here. Here, this is hexagonal close packing. A constant particle in the hexagonal close packing in the same plane is in contact with the 6 spheres. In the above plane is in contact with 3 spheres. In the below plane is in contact with 3 spheres. So the overall coordination number is 12. This is the arrangement in three-dimensional direction. And come to this next one, cubic close packing or FCC lattice. Here three layers are repeated, and this gives face-centered cubic lattice arrangement. This is the arrangement of constant particles in three-dimensional pattern. And this is the overall representation still now what we discussed. Non-close packing and close packing. First one is a primitive cubic. In primitive cubic lattice, each particle is in contact with the 6 nearest neighboring particles, so coordination number is 6. And here in this packing, the same layer is repeated, so it is represented as AA type close packing. And second one is body-centered cubic close packing. In body-centered cubic close packing, each constant particle is surrounded by 8 constant particles, and the repeating pattern is nothing but AB, AB, and so on. And coming to cubic close packing, as well as hexagonal close packing, which is the closest packing in the crystal lattices. In these two packing, the coordination number of the constant particles is 12. Hexagonal close packing has AB-AB type arrangement, whereas cubic close packing has ABC-ABC type arrangement. And come to the next one, location of tetrahedral voids and octahedral voids, and how many tetrahedral voids and octahedral voids are present in an unit cell. Now this is the unit cell, which is nothing but a face-centered cubic lattice. So in this diagram, if you observe here, in the small part, these are the particles of the two opposite face centers, two opposite edge centers. If you join these, we can get an arrangement nothing but which is having the tetrahedral geometry. If you observe here clearly, this is the tetrahedral geometry here. And here, if you take one particle here, this is the location of the particle which is present here, that is called tetrahedral void. And coming to the next diagram here, this is the location of octahedral void. The octahedral voids are located at body center. This is a body center, and at edge center. A cube has one body center and 12 edge centers, and the contribution of the particle at the body center total belongs to unit cell, whereas edge center particle contributes only 1/4 to unit cell, and this is the contribution of particles towards the unit cell. And now, if a system contains n particles, then the number of octahedral voids possible is n, whereas the number of tetrahedral possible is 2n. So this is regarding number of tetrahedral voids and octahedral voids present in a unit cell. And this is the overall description still now what we discussed. A simple cubic lattice contains 8 lattice points. One particle belongs to unit cell, coordination number is 6, and the radius of the particle is equal to a/2, and the nearest neighboring distance is nothing but a. The packing efficiency is pi/6, which is 0.52, and packing efficiency is 52%, and the white space is 48%. Coming to face-centered cubic lattice, number of particles in unit cell is 14, number of particles present in unit cell is 4, coordination number 12, radius of the particle is equal to a/2√2, nearest neighboring distance is a/2, and the packing efficiency is 0.74, which is √2 pi/6, nothing but 74%, and the vacant space is 26%. Body-centered cubic lattice contains 9 constant particles. Out of these, 2 particles belongs to unit cell. The coordination number is 8. The radius of the constant particle is √3a/4, and the nearest neighboring distance is √3a/2. The packing efficiency is √3 pi/8, which is equal to 0.68. So packing efficiency is 68%, and vacant space is 32%. This is regarding the complete description regarding a simple face centered cubic and body centered cubic lattice. Come to the density of unit cell. Density is nothing but mass by volume. Volume is A cube, whereas the mass of the unit cell is Zm by A naught. Then the density of the unit cell will be Zm by A naught A cube. This is the formula which is used to calculate density of unit cell as well as molecular mass of a solid, means that is an element. And come to the next one, crystal defects. So there are mainly three types of crystal defects, which are nothing but stoichiometric defects, non-stoichiometric defects, and impurity defects. Coming to the first one, stoichiometric defects. Again, these stoichiometric defects can be observed in covalent compounds as well as in ionic compounds. And here this is the diagram which indicates the stoichiometric defects which are observed in covalent solids. The first type is vacancy defect and the second type is interstitial defect. So if you observe this first diagram, vacancy defect, here one of the constituent particle is missed from the lattice. Here no particle is present here. So because of the missing of the particle, this is called as vacancy defect. And because of this type of defects, the density of the lattice decreases. Come to the next one, interstitial defects. Here all regular constituent particles are present in their original positions. Along with that, here one more particle is located here as well as here. Means some extra particles are present in the unit cell. Because of the presence of these extra particles, the density of the lattice increases. These are the two types of stoichiometric defects what is observed in covalent compounds. Coming to stoichiometric defects in ionic compounds, there are mainly of two types, Schottky defects and Frenkel defects. In case of Schottky defects, equal number of cations and anions are missed from the lattice. So let us assume this is a negative particle which is the larger one, and this is the positive particle which is the smaller one. And here these two particles, the negative particle and a positive particle is missing from the lattice. As a result, there is no change in the stoichiometry of the lattice, and an overall electrical neutrality is also maintained here. So this type of defects are called as Schottky defects. The condition to exhibit Schottky defect is the given crystalline solid, there is ionic crystal, should contain a high coordination number. This is the basic condition required, and the size of the particle should be nearly same. Come to the next one, Frenkel defects. So this is also observed in ionic compounds where there is a large difference in size of cation and anion. And one more condition required for Frenkel defects is these Frenkel defects are observed in the ionic crystals with a low coordination number. So in case of this Frenkel defect, no particle is removed from the lattice, but see here one particle is missed from the regular lattice, and that particle occupies an interstitial site. As a result, there is no change in the density of the lattice as well as electrical neutrality also maintained. So these are the major type of defects that are observed in ionic solids, which are stoichiometric, Schottky defect and Frenkel defect. Some solids, if you take like AgBr, they can exhibit both Schottky defects as well as Frenkel defects also. And coming to the next one, non-stoichiometric defects. These non-stoichiometric defects are of two types, metal excess defect and metal deficiency defects. Again, metal excess defects is of due to two reasons. One is due to the anionic vacancy, and another one is due to the extra cation present in the lattice. Come to this first diagram here. Here one of the anion is missing from the lattice. As a result, the number of cations in the lattice is more, but the electrical neutrality is disturbed. So in order to maintain electrical neutrality, here that anionic vacancy is occupied by an electron. An electron is occupied here, and this electron maintains the electrical neutrality of the lattice. Since non-metal ions are less, this is called as metal excess defect due to anionic vacancy. And come to this second one. Here if you observe, all the constituent particles are present in their lattice, but an extra cation is occupied in the lattice here. If an extra cation is occupied in the lattice, then electrical neutrality is disturbed. In order to maintain the electrical neutrality, one more particle, that is an electron, occupies its interstitial site. As a result, electrical neutrality is maintained. And coming to this once metal excess defects, Here what the electron occupied here in anionic vacancy, this is called as F center, and these F centers are nothing but called as electrons occupying the anionic vacancy, and these F centers are responsible for the color properties of the ionic compounds. These electrons undergo excitation and excitation, as a result they can exhibit color. So these are metal excess defects due to anionic vacancies. And one more type of defect is there, metal deficiency defects. This type of defects are observed when a metal ion has the ability to exhibit 2 or more oxidation states. In this case, one of the ion is missed from the lattice, but in order to maintain the electrical neutrality, the neighboring atoms can satisfy the higher oxidation number, exhibit higher oxidation number, and they can maintain the electrical neutrality. So this type of defects are observed in hematite, which is Fe2O3. There the lattice contains both Fe+2 as well as Fe+3 ions. This is metal deficiency defects. These are also called as non-stoichiometric defects. And come to the next one, impurity defects. So if a crystal is allowed to crystallize in the presence of another crystal, some of the metal ions are missed from the lattice, and that cationic sites are occupied by the another metal ion. And this diagram shows a NaCl lattice where some of the Na plus ions, if you observe here and here, 2 Na plus ions are removed by 1 strontium ion, but out of the 2 sites, only one site is occupied by strontium, another site is vacancy. That means here an extra atom is introduced, means a foreign atom is introduced, an impurity is introduced into the lattice by replacing the native atoms in the crystal lattice. So this type of defects are called as impurity defects. And coming to the electrical property of the solids, depending on electrical conductivity, solids are divided into 3 types: conductors, semiconductors, and insulators. Conductors are having the range of conductivity in between 10 power 4 to 10 power 7 ohm inverse and meter inverse. Semiconductors are having the conductivity range 10 power minus 6 to 10 power 4 ohm inverse, meter inverse, whereas insulators are having a very low conductivities in the range of 10 power minus 20 to 10 power minus 10. See, this conductivity of these solids can be explained based on the band theory of solids. According to this band theory, the atomic orbitals combine with each other and forms 2 sets of molecular orbital. One set of molecular orbital is having lower energy, which contains electrons. Another set of orbitals is having higher energy, which are vacant. Now there exists some energy gap between the 2 bands, what we call them as forbidden zone. And depending on this forbidden zone, these solids are of 3 types: insulators, semiconductors, and conductors. Come to this first case here. In this diagram, both valence band and conduction band are overlap with each other. Is here. This is the overlapping region where valence band and conduction band overlap with each other. As a result, the electrons can move easily from valence band to conduction band. So these can act as good conductors of electricity. Now come to this one, semiconductors. There is a small energy gap between the valence band and conduction band. So electrons here also can move from valence band to conduction band, and they can conduct electricity. But in case of insulators, there is a large gap between valence band and conduction band. So from here to here, the electrons cannot move easily. As a result, the electrical conductivity is very less. Now in this chapter, we are going to discuss regarding semiconductors. See, semiconductors are of 2 types: intrinsic semiconductors and extrinsic semiconductors. The semiconductivity of a pure substance is nothing but called intrinsic semiconductors. If an intrinsic semiconductor is doped with another atom, then we can get extrinsic semiconductors. Depending on the nature of the doping atom, these extrinsic semiconductors are divided into 2 types. They are N-type semiconductors and P-type semiconductors. So these N-type semiconductors are obtained whenever silicon or germanium is doped with a pentavalent impurity, nothing but 15th group elements. Here the electrical conductivity is mainly due to negative charge, nothing but electrons. That's why these are called as N-type semiconductors. And one more type is P-type semiconductors. These are obtained when silicon is doped with 13th group elements like aluminum, gallium, indium. So here this aluminum is not having a sufficient number of electrons to form the bonds with silicon atoms, which contains a vacant orbital, what we call them as a hole, which is considered as a positive charge. That's why it is called as a p-type semiconductor. Right. Now coming to magnetic properties. The magnetic property of is mainly due to spin of the electron and due to the orbital motion. Depending on the magnetic nature, the solids are divided into 5 types: dia, para, ferro, antiferro, and ferrimagnetic. Dia are repelled by magnetic field, para are weakly attracted by magnetic field. In case of ferromagnetic substances, if you observe here, what represent the arrows here, these represents magnetic domains. All magnetic domains are aligned in the same direction, which are ferromagnetic substances. Magnetic domains are aligned in parallel and anti-parallel direction in equal number, which is called antiferromagnetic materials. Mag domains are aligned in parallel as well as in anti-parallel direction in unequal number. These are called ferrimagnetic materials. So this is regarding a synopsis of this chapter. Now come to the first question. The given question is, which of the following statements about amorphous solids is incorrect? Now only we discussed regarding differences between amorphous solids and crystalline solids. The first option is they melt over a range of temperature. This is the correct statement, because amorphous solids are not having sharp melting points. They can melt over a range of temperatures. This statement is correct. They are anisotropic. So this is the wrong statement here, because amorphous solids are isotropic in nature. Come to the third one. There is no orderly arrangement of particles. This statement is correct. They are rigid and incompressible, because solids are rigid and incompressible, both crystalline as well as amorphous solids. So this statement also correct. So the wrong statement is nothing but second statement. So our answer is 2. And come to the next one. Which of the following is a covalent crystal? The first option is rock salt. See, rock salt is nothing but NaCl. This contains constituent particle Na plus and Cl minus, which is ionic crystal. Ice. Ice contains water molecules which are bonded by hydrogen bond. This is a covalent crystal. Quartz. The quartz formula is silica SiO2. In this, each silicon is surrounded by 4 oxygen atoms in tetrahedral geometry by covalent bonds. This is a covalent solid. Whereas dry ice is nothing but a solid CO2. This is a covalent solid. Sorry, this is a molecular solid. So our answer is quartz, silica, which is nothing but third option. And come to the next one. The unit cell with crystallographic dimensions A is not equal to B is not equal to C, and axial angles alpha is equal to gamma is equal to 90, whereas beta is not equal to 90. The given options are monoclinic, tetragluon, triclinic, and orthorhombic. Here the parameters given clearly. For monoclinic, it is A is not equal to B is not equal to C, and alpha is equal to gamma is equal to 90, comma beta is not equal to 90. For tetragonal, A is equal to B is not equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma is equal to 90. For triclinic, A is not equal to B not equal to C, alpha not equal to beta not equal to gamma not equal to 90. For orthorhombic, A is not equal to B is not equal to C, and alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma is equal to 90. So the given parameters are coincide with the monoclinic crystal system. So our answer is the first option. Come to the next one. Which type of crystal contains more than one type of Bravais lattices? See, here if you take a hexagonal system, it contains only one type of lattice. Triclinic system contains one type of lattice. Rhombohedral contains one type of lattice, whereas monoclinic contains 2 types of lattices. There is a primitive unit cell and end-centered unit cell. So our answer is fourth option, monoclinic. And come to the next one. In tetragonal system, which of the following is true? And the given options are all axial lengths and axial angles are equal. Second one is all the 3 axial lengths are equal. Third one is all the 3 axial angles are equal. Fourth one is 2 axial angles are equal, but the third is different. So if you take the parameters of tetragonal, A is equal to B is not equal to C, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma is equal to 90. So here 2 lengths are equal, all axial angles are equal. Come to the first statement, all axial lengths and axial angles are equal. This is the wrong statement. All 3 axial lengths are equal. Here only 2 axial lengths are equal, third is not equal. This is also wrong statement. all three axial angles are equal. Here all three axial angles are equal, so this is the correct option. And coming to the fourth one, two axial angles are equal, but here three axial angles are equal, so our answer is third option. And come to the next question. The most unsymmetrical system and symmetrical systems are, the given options are tetragonal and cubic, triclinic and cubic, rhombohedral and hexagonal, orthorhombic and cubic. Now if you see the parameters here, for a triclinic system, A is not equal to B is not equal to C, alpha is not equal to beta is not equal to gamma is not equal to 90. All lengths as well as angles are entirely different. So there is the most unsymmetric system. In cubic system, all lengths as well as all angles are equal to one another. So this is the most symmetric system. So our answer is a triclinic and cubic, which is a second option. And come to the next one. The close packing sequence AB is represents. The first option is simple cubic, second option is FCC packing, third one is hexagonal close packing, and fourth one is BCC packing. So in simple cubic close packing, we will have an arrangement of AAA type arrangement. This is the first option. In FCC arrangement, we can get ABC type of arrangement. In case of hexagonal system, we will get AB type of arrangement. So here our answer is AB type arrangement, which is nothing but hexagonal close packing. So the answer is third option. And come to the next one. A compound is formed by two elements A and B. Atoms of A are at the corners of the cube and B atoms are at the face centers. The formula of the compound is, the first option is AB, second option is AB3, third option is A2B, and fourth option is A3B. See, atoms of A are present at 8 corners and contribution of each corner is 1 by 8. So number of particles is 8 into 1 by 8, which is equal to 1. Atoms of B are present at 6 face centers. Contribution of face center is 1 by 2. So the total number of particles is equal to 6 into 1 by 2, which is equal to 3. So 1 atom of A and 3 atoms of B are present. So the formula is A1B3, which is equal to AB3. So among the given options, the second option is the correct answer here. And coming to the next question. In an alloy of metals A, B and C, A forms FCC lattice, B occupies the center of each edge and C is present at the center of the lattice. The formula of the alloy is, now see here, A forms FCC lattice, means A is present at 8 corners and 6 face centers. So if you calculate the contribution of 8 corners and 6 face centers, we can get 8 into 1 by 8 plus 6 into 1 by 2, which is equal to 4 atoms here. And B occupies center of the edge. There are 12 edges for a cubic system and contribution of the particle at the edge center is 1 by 4. So the 12 edge contributions is nothing but 12 into 1 by 4, which is equal to 3 atoms. Since C occupies at the center, see the particle at the center cannot share with any other unit cells, the total particle belongs to unit cell only. So 1 into 1, which is equal to 1 atom. So number of atoms of A is 4, B is 3 and C is equal to 1. So A4, B3, C1, hence the formula is A4, B3, C. So our answer is the fourth option, A4, B3, C. And come to the next one. In a solid AB having NaCl structure, A atoms occupy the corners of the cubic unit cell. If all the face centered atoms along the one of the axes are removed, then the resultant stoichiometry of the solid is. The given options are AB2, A2B, A4B3, A3B4. See, in NaCl type of structures, one type of particles occupies corners and face centers, another type of particles occupies body center and edge center. Now here I have taken here A atoms are present at 8 corners and 6 face centers. So B atoms are present at 1 body center and 12 edge centers. And now in this we have eliminated the particle along the one of the axis. Means we have eliminated 2 face center particles. Along one axis 2 face centers are present. So we have eliminated 2 face centers. Then remaining face centers are only 4. So A particles are present at 8 corners and 6 face centers. So its contribution, if you calculate 8 into corner contribution 1 by 8 plus 4 into face center contribution 1 by 2, total will be 3 atoms of A are present in unit cell. Now coming to atoms of B, So 1 body center and 12 edge centers are there. So body center contribution is 1 into 1. To edge center contribution is 1 by 4. So 12 into 1 by 4, which is equal to 4. So on the total, we are having 3 atoms of A and 4 atoms of B. So the formula is A3B4. So our answer is the fourth option. Come to the next one. The number of tetrahedral and octahedral wires per unit cell of cubic closed packed structure is. As we know that the cubic closed packing contains 4 atoms present in the unit cell, and if a system contains n particles, number of tetrahedral wires will be 2n and number of octahedral wires will be n. Then the given FCC lattice contains 4 atoms present in the unit cell, so number of tetrahedral wires is equal to 8 and number of octahedral wires is equal to 4. So the answer is third option, 8, 4. And coming to the next question. A forms HCP lattice and B are occupying 1/3 of the tetrahedral wires. Then the formula of the compound is. The options are AB, A3B2, A2B3 and AB4. See here, let the number of atoms of A in HCP lattice is X and B atoms are occupying 1/3 of tetrahedral wires. Since number of atoms of A is X, total number of tetrahedral wires will be 2X. In that only 1/3 is occupied by B. So number of atoms of B will be 2x by 3. So now the molecular formula is AX B 2x by 3. If you cancel X and X and if you simplify that, you will get the formula A3 B2. So the answer will be second option, A3 B2. And now coming to the next question. See, every atom or ion that forms an FCC unit cell is surrounded by. The options are 6 octahedral wires, 8 tetrahedral wires, 8 octahedral wires and 6 tetrahedral wires. Third one is 6 octahedral wires and 6 tetrahedral wires. Fourth one is 8 octahedral wires and 4 tetrahedral wires. See, if you take one cubic system here, just I am going to draw a simple diagram here. So this is a cubic system. So if you take a corner particle, so this corner particle is in contact with like this. You can represent. This is one edge center, this is one edge center, this is one edge center, this is here one edge center, this is one edge center, and here we can get one edge center. That means this is in contact with the 6 edge centers. That means it is in contact with 6 octahedral wires. Edge center is nothing but octahedral wire. So the particle at the corner is in contact with 6 edge centers, that is 8. So that is 6 octahedral wires. Now, in addition to this, this corner particle is in contact with the tetrahedral wire which is present inside the unit cell. And this corner is shared with the 8 unit cells. So it is in contact with the 8 tetrahedral units in 8 unit cells. That means a given particle in FCC lattice is in contact with 6 octahedral wires and 8 tetrahedral wires. So our answer is the first option. Come to the next question. The first 3 nearest neighboring distance for a body centered cubic lattice are. Alright. Now you see here, I will take one simple BCC lattice structure here. In BCC lattice, the particles are present at 8 corners and body center. Actually, these particles are all in contact with each other. There is no gap between the constituent particles. Just for simplicity, I draw like this. Now, our question is the first 3 nearest neighboring distance for body centered cubic lattice is. Right. See here, these are the 2 particles which are in contact with each other here. The total body diagonal length is equal to root 3a. Then, in this half of the length is nothing but root 3a by 2. This is the first nearest neighboring distance between the constituent particles in BCC lattice. The next nearest neighboring particles are the particles which are present at the corners of an edge. Since edge length is a, the nearest neighboring distance is a between the 2 particles. And the third nearest neighboring distance is nothing but the face diagonal particles. This is the third nearest neighboring particles. As you know that the face diagonal is equal to root 2a. So The first nearest neighboring particles are corner and body center. The second nearest neighboring particles are edge center particles. The third nearest neighboring particles are two corner particles of a face diagonal. So the answer is the first nearest neighboring distance root 3a by 2, second nearest neighboring distance is a, and third nearest neighboring distance is root a. So our answer is the third option. And come to the next one. If a stands for the edge length of the cubic system, then the radius of the spheres in the simple BCC and FCC lattice will be. So if you take a simple cubic lattice, for simple cubic lattice edge length is equal to 2r, then radius of the particle is equal to a by 2. In case of body diagonal, the particles are in contact with each other on body diagonal. The body diagonal length is equal to root 2 3a, which is equal to 4 times of the radius, then radius of the particle is root 3a by 4. In a face centered cubic lattice, the face diagonal particles are in contact with each other. The face diagonal length is root 2a, which is equal to 4r, then radius of the particle is equal to root 2a by 4, which is equal to a by 2 root 2. So our answer is a by 2, root 3a by 4, and a by 2 root 2. So here the third option is the correct answer. And come to the next one. Lithium forms body centered cubic lattice. The edge length of the side of the unit cell is 351 picometers. The atomic radius of the lithium will be. See here the given lattice is body centered cubic lattice. For body centered cubic lattice, the relation between edge length and radius is r is equal to root 3a by 2. Here the edge length value is given as 351 picometers, and by substituting this 351 in this relation and on simplifying you will get a value of 152 picometers. So the answer is the fourth option, 152 picometers. Coming to the next one. The edge length of FCC unit cell is 600 picometers. If the radius of cation is 180 picometers, the radius of the anion would be, right. See, in case of ionic crystals which are having NaCl type of lattice, if you take an edge length, the edge length contains one type of ion at the center, let it be cation, and one particle here as well as here, these are anions. This is one radius. From here to here, this is radius, and this is radius. That means the total edge length A is equal to 2 times of radius of anion plus 2 times of radius of cation. Now the same I have equalized here. Edge length is equal to 2 times of radius of cation and anion. The edge length given is 600 picometers, and cation radius is given as 180 picometers. By substituting edge length and cation radius value and on simplifying, you can get radius of anion as 120 picometers. So our answer is third option. And coming to the next question. Calculate the number of unit cells in a cubic crystal NaCl weighing 0.585 grams and given atomic mass of sodium is 23 and chlorine is 35.5. So if you know one unit cell contains 4 NaCl units, then 1 mole contains 4 moles of NaCl. 1 mole means nothing but Avogadro number, which is 6.0 into 10 power 23. So 6.023 into 10 power 23 unit cells are present in 4 into 58.5 grams of NaCl. Then how many number of unit cells are present in a given mass 0.585 grams? And just on cross multiplying this, we will get the answer here as 1.5 into 10 power 21 unit cells. So our answer is the first option, 1.5 into 10 power 21 unit cells. And next one. AB crystallizes in body centered cubic lattice with a edge length equal to 387 picometers. The distance between the two oppositely charged ions in the lattice is. See, the distance between the two oppositely charged ions is nothing but the nearest neighboring distance. The nearest neighboring distance for a BCC lattice is nothing but equal to root 3a by 2. And here given already the edge length value given as 387 picometers. By substituting that edge length in this formula root 3a by 2, if you simplify, you will get the answer as 355 picometers. So our answer is the first option. And coming to the next question. The density and edge length of crystalline element with FCC lattice are 10 grams per centimeter cube and 400 picometers respectively. The atomic mass of the element is The given options are 32, 64, 96 and 128. As you know that the formula for calculating density of the lattice is Zm by Na cube, where Z is number of atoms present in unit cell. Since the given lattice is FCC lattice, number of atoms present in unit cell is equal to 4. And here we have to calculate the atomic mass. Then atomic mass is equal to density into Avogadro number into A cube by Z. And on substituting the values by converting edge length in terms of centimeters, then we can get, because density is given in grams per centimeter cube. So first of all, we should convert this picometers into centimeter, and then if we substitute in the given relation, then we will get atomic mass as 96 grams per centimeter cube. So our answer is third option. And come to the next question. Which of the following is incorrect statement? The first option is density decreases in case of crystals with Schottky defects. And second option is Fe 0.980 has non-stoichiometric metal deficiency defect. And third one is F center generation is responsible factor for importing the color of the crystal. And fourth one is Frenkel defects are favored in those ionic compounds in which the size of cation and anion are equal. Now coming to the first option, density decreases in case of Schottky defects. This is correct one. Why? Because in Schottky defects, some particles are missing from the lattice. As a result, the density of the lattice decreases. So the first statement is given is correct. And come to the second one, Fe 0.980 has a non-stoichiometric metal deficiency defect. So if you observe this formula clearly, Fe 0.980, here number of metal atoms are less as compared to non-metal atoms. So this is a metal deficiency defect and there is no stoichiometry. So this statement also correct. And come to the third one, F centers, which are nothing but electrons occupying the anionic vacancies. These electrons can undergo excitation and de-excitation. As a result, they can impart color to the given crystal. So this statement also correct. And coming to the fourth one, Frenkel defects are favored in those ionic compounds in which the size of the cation and anion are equal. This is the wrong one. Why? Because Frenkel defects are more favored in crystals which contains low coordination number and there is a large difference between the size of cation and anion. But the given is anion and cation are having equal sizes. So this is a wrong statement. So our answer is the fourth option. And coming to the next question, doping of AgCl crystal with cadmium chloride results in. Then what is meant by doping? Doping means nothing but the introducing a foreign atom into the lattice. There is nothing more called as doping. So when AgCl is allowed to crystallize with cadmium chloride, then we can observe some type of defects. Then among the given, which is correct option they have asked here. The first one is Schottky defects, second one is Frenkel defects, third one is cationic vacancy defect, and fourth one is the formation of F centers. See, when AgCl is doped with cadmium chloride, one cadmium ion, if you take a cadmium valence is Cd plus 2 and a silver valence is Az plus 1. So one cadmium ion is equal to 2 silver ions. So one cadmium can replace 2 silver ions, but out of the two sides only one side is occupied. As a result, number of metal ions in the lattice will be less. So it is nothing but a cationic vacancy defect. So our answer is the third option, cationic vacancy defect. And coming to the next question. If NaCl is doped with a 10 power minus 4 mole percent of strontium chloride, the concentration of the cationic vacancies per mole will be. The given options are 6.02 into 10 power 16, 6.02 into 10 power 17, 6.02 into 10 power 14 and 6.02 into 10 power 19. See here, we have introduced 10 power minus 4 mole percent of strontium chloride. That is nothing but 10 power minus 4 divided by 100 into Avogadro number, because the given is mole percent. 1 mole is nothing but Avogadro number. So if you simplify that, we will get 6.023 into 10 power 17. Means that we are introducing a 6.023 into 10 power 17 strontium ions into the lattice. Then we have to calculate how many cationic vacancies per mole will be. See here, as you know, one strontium ion can replace 2 sodium ions, but out of the two sides, only one side will be occupied by strontium ion and one side will be vacant. That means that how many strontium ions we are introducing into the lattice? Same number of cationic vacancies will be there in the lattice. So number of cationic vacancies is nothing but number of strontium ions introduced into the lattice, which is nothing but 6.023 into 10 power 17. So our answer is the second option. This is the correct answer here. Dear students, now we are going to discuss about the chapter solutions. Now let us see the synopsis in brief. Solution, it is a homogeneous mixture of two or more substances. In solution, the component which is in large amounts is solvent and small amounts is solute. The solution containing only two components is called binary solution. The solution contains maximum amount of dissolved solute is called saturated, which contains less than that is called unsaturated solution. So different types of solutions: solid solutions, liquid solutions, and gaseous solutions. And here in detail I give the different types of solutions with examples. And come to the next one, methods to express the amount of solute in a solution. Mass percentage, it is the mass of solute present in 100 grams of solution. Volume percentage, it is the volume of solute present in 100 ml of solution. Mass to volume percentage, it is the mass of solute present in 100 ml of solution. Parts per million, it is the number of parts by mass of a solute present in million parts by mass of solution. Mole fraction, it is the ratio of number of moles of one component to the total number of moles of all components in the solution. And next one is molarity. It is the number of moles of solute dissolved in 1 liter of solution, and this is the formula which is used to calculate molarity, which is weight by molecular weight into 1000 by volume in ml. And this molarity is temperature dependent. By changing temperature, molarity changes. That is, by increasing temperature, volume increases, thereby molarity decreases. And come to the next one, molality. It is the number of moles of solute dissolved in 1 kg of solvent. And this is the temperature independent, because by changing temperature, the mass of a substance cannot changes. So it is independent on temperature, and this is the best method for expressing the concentration of a solution. And next one, solubility. See, the solubility of solids, if you take, it mainly depends on 4 different factors: nature of solute, nature of solvent, temperature, and pressure. See, when a solid dissolves in a solute endothermically, according to Le Chatelier principle, as temperature increases, solubility increases. The same if solid dissolves in exothermically, according to Le Chatelier principle, as temperature increases, solubility decreases. Pressure has no effect on solubility of solids, because solids and liquids are incompressible. And coming to the solubility of gases and liquids, it mainly depends on nature of gas, nature of liquid, temperature, and pressure. And for this solubility of gases in liquids, we can explain based on Henry's law, which is nothing but at a given temperature, the partial vapor pressure of a gas is directly proportional to mole fraction of the gas, in the solution. Then P is equal to Kh into X, and this Kh value is different for different gases. As temperature increases, Kh value increases. Kh is less for more soluble gases and more for less soluble gases. And this Henry's law is applicable only at low temperature, where gases cannot react with solvents, and the temperature should not be too high. And next one, Raoult's law of volatile liquids. So according to this, the partial vapor pressure of each component in the solution is directly proportional to its mole fraction. If the solution contains two components A and B, then Pa is equal to P naught A XA, Pb is equal to P naught B XB, and the total pressure of solution is equal to sum of the partial pressures according to Dalton's law. Then we can get the equation pressure of solution is equal to P naught A XA plus P naught B XB, and the same equation we can also modify like this. And if you want to calculate the mole fraction of the component gaseous phase, which is taken as Ya and Yb, and the relation is Pa is equal to Ya into Ps, whereas Pb is equal to Yb into Ps. Based on this relation, we can calculate mole fraction of component gaseous phase. And there are types of solutions: ideal and non-ideal solutions. The solution which obeys Raoult's law is called ideal solution, which does not obey Raoult's law is called non-ideal solution. They can show negative deviation as well as positive deviation. Means, in a non-ideal solution with negative deviation, the total pressure will be less than expected value, whereas in non-ideal solution with positive deviation they can show more value than expected value. In case of ideal solution, delta V mixture and delta H mixture both are 0. In case of negative deviation, both are negative. In case of positive deviation, both are positive. The reason is that in solution, the interaction between AB is more than in pure component liquids AA and BB, then they shows negative deviation. If the interaction between A and B is less than in pure components, then they can show positive deviation. And this is the graphical representation which indicates ideal and non-ideal solutions. The first one indicates ideal solution, second one indicates non-ideal solution with positive deviation, third one indicates non-ideal solution with negative deviation. And these are some examples what are given here for ideal, non-ideal, which shows positive as well as negative deviation. And coming to the colligative properties. See, the properties of the solution which depends on nature of number of solid particles but not on the nature of solute or solvent are called colligative properties. And these colligative properties are relative lowering of vapor pressure, elevation of boiling point, depression in freezing point, and osmotic pressure. Let us come to one by one. Raoult's law. According to this Raoult's law, relative lowering of vapor pressure containing a non-volatile solute is equal to mole fraction of solute, and the relation is P naught minus P by P naught is equal to N by N plus capital N, where small n is number of moles of solute, capital N is number of moles of solvent. And in case of a very dilute solution, what the number of moles of solute in denominator, this we can neglect. Then equation can be modified as P naught minus P by P naught is equal to N by capital N, and this we can represent like this: small w by small m into capital M by capital W. This is regarding Raoult's law. And come to the next one, elevation in boiling point. So this is the graphical representation which can show elevation in boiling point. So this is the boiling point of a solution, this is the boiling point of a solution, and X is nothing but boiling point of solvent. So a solution always boils at higher temperature than compared to solvent, because when a non-volatile solid is added to a solvent, its vapor pressure decreases. So the solution boils at a higher temperature than compared to a solvent. Now the difference between the boiling points of solution and solvent is nothing but called as elevation of boiling point, that is directly proportional to molality, and we can equalize them by multiplying with a constant called Kb, which is nothing but molal elevation constant. And if you substitute the formula for molality, then we can get this relation: delta Tb is equal to Kb into W2 by M2 into 1000 by W1, and from this we can calculate the molecular mass of unknown solute by this following relation, where the value of Kb can be calculated by the relation RT square by 1000 Lv or RT square M by 1000 delta H vaporization. So this is regarding elevation of boiling point. Similarly, coming to the depression in freezing point. See, this is the graph which shows the freezing of a liquid. At this temperature, there is a sharp change in vapor pressure of solution. Means that at this temperature, liquid is converted to solid. So this is TF. This is the freezing point of pure solvent. When a solution containing non-volatile solid is taken, the vapor pressure is less. So the solution will freezes at a lower temperature than compared to a solvent. Now this is the freezing point for a solution. There is a difference between the freezing point of solution and solvent, which is called as delta TF. And here also delta TF is proportional to molality, and we can equalize that by multiplying a constant which is called Kf. So delta TF is equal to Kf into M. And if you substitute the relation for molality, then delta TF is equal to Kf into W2 by M2 into 1000 by W1, and from this we can calculate the molecular mass of an unknown solute by this relation. And this is the relation which is used to calculate Kf, which is nothing but called as a cryoscopic constant, or is also called as molal depression constant. And come to the next one, osmotic pressure. See, the flow of solvent molecules from a solvent into solution through a semi-permeable membrane is called osmosis. In order to prevent the flow of solvent molecules into solution from the solvent through semipermeable membrane, we should have to apply certain pressure over the solution. The minimum pressure that is required in order to prevent the flow of solvent molecules into solution through semi-permeable membrane is nothing but called as osmotic pressure. So we can define this as the external pressure applied on the solution to prevent osmosis through semi-permeable membrane is called osmotic pressure. Experimental evidence shows that the osmotic pressure is directly proportional to molarity, as well as osmotic pressure is directly proportional to temperature. So pi is proportional to temperature and concentration, and we can equalize this by multiplying the constant R, which is nothing but called solution constant, which is numerically equal to gas constant, and the value of R is nothing but 0.081 liter atmosphere per mole per Kelvin. So here pi is equal to CRT. C is nothing but molarity, which is nothing but number of moles by volume in liters. Then pi V is equal to nRT. This is the relation which is used to calculate osmotic pressure. And number of moles is nothing but a molecular mass of solute by mass of solute by molecular mass of solute. Then we can calculate molecular mass of solute by using the relation M2 is equal to W2RT by pi V. And coming to one more important feature, the isotonic solutions. These are also called as isoosmotic solutions. Two or more solutions having same osmotic pressure are called isotonic solutions. That means pi 1 is equal to pi 2. So pi 1 is C1RT, pi 2 is equal to C2RT. If we cancel RT and RT here, the remaining is C1 is equal to C2. C1 is nothing but molarity, W2 by M2 into 1000 by W1, and C2 also molarity. So here you can cancel 1000 by W1 and 1000 by W1. The remaining is W2 by M2 for first one is equal to W2 by M2 for second one. And now come to the next one. Abnormal molar mass. See, when a solute undergo dissociation or association, then we can observe abnormality in colligative properties. That is, the colligative property is more than expected value. Since when a solute undergo dissociation, number of solute particles are increased, so colligative property increases. When a solute undergo association, the colligative property will be decreased. So in order to avoid this confusion, the scientist Van 't Hoff introduced a new factor which is represented as I, and this Van 't Hoff factor we can calculate by using the relation I is equal to observed colligative property by normal colligative property. Otherwise, number of particles after dissociation or association by number of particles before dissociation or association. Otherwise, normal molecular weight by observed molecular weight. So by introducing the Van 't Hoff factor, we can modify the colligative properties like this. This is the modified relations by introducing Van 't Hoff factor. And one more important feature here is the Van 't Hoff factor depends upon the degree of dissociation. When a solute undergo dissociation, the relation between Van 't Hoff factor and the degree of dissociation is alpha is equal to I minus 1 by n minus 1. Similarly, if a solute undergo association, then the relation between Van 't Hoff factor and degree of association is alpha is equal to 1 minus I by 1 minus 1 by n. So this is regarding synopsis. Now we will go to the one by one question. Come to the first one. How many grams of concentrated nitric acid solution should be used to prepare 250 ml of 2 molar HNO3 solution, given that the concentration of the acid is 70% HNO3? The options are 70 grams, 54 grams, 45 grams, 90 grams. So here you have to calculate how many grams of nitric acid required to prepare the given concentrated solution of 250 ml. So first apply the molarity formula and calculate the mass of HNO3 required. The formula to calculate molarity is M is equal to mass of solute by molecular mass of solute into 1000 by volume of solution. Since given the molarity is 2 molar and the volume is 250 ml and the molecular mass of HNO3 is here 63. If you substitute these three values, we can get mass 63 by 2. So this 63 by 2 grams of HNO3 required is 100% pure substance, but the given concentrated solution is nothing but 70% only. So now we have to calculate how many grams of 70% HNO3 is required. 70% given, so 70 by 100 into required mass is 63 by 2, which is nothing but 45 grams. So the third option is the correct answer here. Now coming to the second question. What is the mole fraction of solute in a 1 molal aqueous solution? The given is 1 molal aqueous solution, means that 1 mole of solute is present in 1000 grams of water. So number of moles of solute is 1, mass of solvent is 1000 grams. As you know, mole fraction is equal to number of moles of one component by total number of moles. So this is the number of moles of solute divided by number of moles of solute plus 1000 by 18 mass by molecular mass of water. This gives number of moles of water. Then on simplifying, you can get a 1 by 56.5, which is equal to 0.0177. So our answer is third option. Coming to the next question. 250 ml of Na2CO3 solution containing 2.65 grams of Na2CO3. 10 ml of this solution is added to X ml of water to obtain 0.001 m Na2CO3 solution. The value of X is, the first given condition is 250 ml of Na2CO3 solution contains 2.65 grams of Na2CO3. Now, volume of solution is 250 ml, mass of solute is 2.65 grams. By using this volume and mass of solute, first we will calculate a molarity of the solution by applying molarity formula. So here given mass is 2.65 grams, molecular mass of sodium carbonate is 106, the volume of solution given is 250 ml, and simplifying we can get 0.1 molar. This is the first part. Now this 0.1 molar solution, by taking 10 ml, that is added to X ml, that means the total volume becomes 10 plus X. Initial volume is 10, final volume is 10 plus X. Initial concentration is 0.1, final concentration is 0.001. So now here apply dilution law, which is nothing but M1 V1 is equal to M2 V2. So by substituting M1 V1 M2 and V2 values, here we will get X value 990 ml. That means the volume of water added is equal to 990 ml. So the answer is second option. Come to the next one. The volumes of two HCl solutions having concentration 0.5 m and 0.1 m to be mixed for preparing 2 liters of 0.2 m HCl are. Now here the total volume of solution is 2 liters. The volume of either A or B are not given. So let the volume of A is X liters first. Then what is the remaining volume? 2 minus X liters. That is the volume of B. So volume of A is equal to X liters. Volume of B is equal to 2 minus X liters. The concentration of A given is 0.5 and concentration of B given is 0.1. Now apply dilution law. When two solutions of different volumes and different concentrations are mixed, the relation is MAVA plus MVVB is equal to M into VA plus VB. Now by substituting all these values MA, VA, MB, VB, and on simplifying we will get X is equal to 0.5 liters. That means the volume of A is 0.5 liters and the remaining volume, that is 1.5 liters, is volume of B. So in order to prepare the required solution, we have to mix 0.5 liters of A and 1.5 liters of B. So our answer is the first option. Coming to the next one. The value of Henry's constant Kh is, see, the value of Kh depends on the nature of the gas. So if the given gas is more soluble, the value of Kh is less. If the given gas is less soluble, the value of Kh is more. Since at a given temperature pressure remains constant, if the value of Kh is more, X value is less. Means that for less soluble gases, the value as X decreases, Kh value increases. Means less soluble gases has more Kh value, more soluble gases has less Kh value. Now let us see the options here. Greater for gases with a higher solubility. This is the wrong one, because if solubility is more, Henry's constant will be less. Second one, greater for gases with a lower solubility. So this statement is correct, because if solubility is less, then Henry's constant will be more. Come to the third one, constant for all gases. This is the wrong statement. See, the Henry's constant even not same for the same gas. At different temperatures, the Kh value is different. And given fourth option is not related to solubility of the gas. Now only we discussed the Kh value is related to X. So the fourth statement also wrong. So our answer is greater for gases with lower solubility. And come to the next question. Henry's law constant for the solubility of N2 gas in water at 298 Kelvin is 1.0 into 10 power 5 atmospheres. The mole fraction of N2 in air is 0.8. The number of moles of N2 from the air dissolved in 10 moles of water at 298 Kelvin and 5 atmospheres is. Right. See, here we have to calculate the solubility of nitrogen gas in water. Means we have to apply here the Henry's law. So in order to apply the Henry's law, first of all we should know what is the number of moles of nitrogen gas dissolved in water. So here the mole fraction of nitrogen given in air is 0.8 and the total pressure of the gas given is 5 atmospheres. From that, first I will calculate what is the pressure exerted by the nitrogen gas. So as we know, partial pressure is equal to mole fraction into total pressure. Mole fraction of nitrogen is 0.8, total pressure given is 5, then the pressure exerted by the nitrogen gas is 4 atmospheres. Now I will apply Henry's law. P is equal to Kh into X. It implies X is equal to P by Kh. So here we got pressure of nitrogen gas is 4 atmosphere. So pressure P is equal to 4 atmospheres. And Henry's constant given is 1 into 10 power 5. So I have substituted Kh value 1 into 10 power 5 here. And on simplifying, I will get 4 into 10 power minus 5. This is the mole fraction of nitrogen. So the formula for mole fraction of nitrogen I have represented here, number of moles of nitrogen by number of moles of nitrogen plus number of moles of water. Since nitrogen is less soluble in water, the number of moles of nitrogen in denominator is very less, so we can neglect this. Then the relation becomes 4 into 10 power minus 5 is equal to number of moles of nitrogen by number of moles of water. This is the relation. Since given there is 10 moles of water, so substitute 10 in place of number of moles of water, then we will get number of moles of nitrogen as 4 into 10 power minus 4. So among the given options, the correct option is 1 into 10 power minus 4. So overall in this problem, first we have calculated the pressure of the nitrogen gas, and from the pressure we have calculated the mole fraction of the nitrogen gas, and then from the mole fraction of the nitrogen gas we have calculated number of moles of nitrogen gas in 3 stages. Coming to the next question. Henry's law constant for the gas at 298 Kelvin is 100 kilobar. If the gas exerts a partial pressure of 1 bar, the number of millimoles of the gas dissolved in 1 liter of the water is, and this is also based on Henry's law. As we know that P is equal to kH into X, then mole fraction is equal to pressure by kH. The given pressure is 1 bar, so P is equal to 1 bar, and Henry's law constant given is 100 kilobar. Kilo means 1000, so 100 kilobar means 100 into 1000, which is equal to 10 power 5. So we have taken here 100 into 10 cube bars. So we got kH value as 10 power minus 5. So mole fraction X is equal to number of moles of X by number of moles of X plus number of moles of water. Since number of moles of X is less here as compared to number of moles of water, so we can neglect this Nx value in denominator. Now, so the relation is 10 power minus 5 is equal to number of moles of X divided by number of moles of water. How you will get number of moles of water here? So here we have taken 1 liter of water. The mass of 1 liter of water is nothing but equal to 1000 grams. Then number of moles is equal to mass by molecular mass, that is 1000 by 18. Then on simplifying this, we will get N value 55.5 into 10 power minus 5 moles. Convert this into millimoles, then we can get 0.555 millimoles. So our answer is first option. Come to the next one. A solution containing components A and B shows positive deviation from Raoult's law when. See, if you take two component liquids AA, BB, these are the two component liquids. When you mix A and B, we have to break these bonds and then attractions developed between A and B. Here asked is positive deviation. See, whenever in a solution the attractive forces between the component molecules, that is A and B, are less than compared in pure component liquids, then the solution can show positive deviation. That is, if the attractive forces in the solution are less than compared to attractive forces in pure components AA and BB, then the solution can show positive deviation. So here among the given options, the first one is AB attraction forces are greater than AA and BB. So in this case, the solution can show negative deviation but not positive deviation. AB attraction force is same as AA and BB. In attractive forces between component molecules before mixing and after mixing is same, then this is a ideal solution. The attractive forces between A and B is less than A and BB, then it can show positive deviation. And come to the fourth one, volume of solution is equal to sum of the volumes of A and B, then this is also an ideal solution. So among the given options, the third option is the correct one. Come to the next one. Which of the following is incorrect for ideal solution? The given options are delta H mixture is equal to 0, delta U mixture is equal to 0, delta V mixture is equal to 0, delta S mixture is equal to 0. See, in case of ideal solutions, we know that delta H mixture is equal to 0. There is no change in enthalpy during mixing, and delta V mixture is also equal to 0 because during mixing there is no change in volume. So delta V mixture also 0. As you know, delta H is equal to delta U plus delta N RT. Otherwise, delta H is equal to delta U plus P delta V. Since here there is no change in volume, this term equal to 0. Since this is equal to 0, delta H is equal to delta U. As we discussed now, delta H is equal to 0, so delta U also equal to 0. Now coming to delta S mixture. See, when two solutions are mixed, the total volume of the solution increases. The distance between the constituent particles increases. That is, randomness of the system increases. If randomness of the system is increased, then delta S is not equal to 0. That is, delta S is greater than 0. So the correct answer is delta S greater than 0. But here given option is delta S mixture is equal to 0. So delta X mixture is equal to 0 is the incorrect for ideal solutions. So our answer is fourth option. And come to the next one. The vapor pressure of two liquids P and Q are 80 and 60 torrs respectively. The total vapor pressure of solution obtained by mixing 3 moles of P and 2 moles of Q would be. The options are 72 torrs, 140 torrs, 68 torrs and 20 torrs. See, this is a binary liquid solution. According to Raoult's law, for a binary liquid solution, the total pressure of the solution is equal to sum of the partial pressures. And here given the pressures of the pure components 80 and 60 torrs respectively. So P naught P is equal to 80 torrs and P naught Q is equal to 60 torrs. Number of moles of P is equal to 3 and number of moles of Q is equal to 2. Now, if you substitute all these 4 values in this relation, then we can get pressure of P is 80, number of moles of P 3, total number of moles is 3 plus 2, pressure of Q is 60, number of moles of Q is equal to 20 and total number of moles is 3 plus 2, 5. And if you simplify this, we will get the total pressure of the system as 72 torrs. So our answer is first option. Next one. A solution has 1:4 mole ratio of pentane to hexane. The vapor pressure of pure pentane is 440 mm and hexane is 120 mm. What is the mole fraction of pentane in vapor phase? Right. So here the system contains 1:4 mole ratio of pentane to hexane. Means number of moles of pentane is 1 and number of moles of hexane is equal to 4. First I will calculate mole fraction of pentane, that is 1 by 1 plus 4, which is equal to 1 by 5. The mole fraction of hexane, which is 4 by 1 plus 4, that is 4 by 5. Then according to Raoult's law, the pressure of the component is equal to pure component vapor pressure into mole fraction. Then pure component vapor pressure for pentane is 440 and its mole fraction is 1 by 5, and if you simplify that, you will get 88. Similarly, we can calculate for hexane. The pure component vapor pressure of hexane is 120 and mole fraction of hexane is 4 by 5, and on simplifying this we will get 96. So pressure of pentane is 88, pressure of hexane is 96. Then according to Dalton's law, mole fraction of C5H12 in vapor phase is equal to partial pressure of pentane divided by partial pressure of hexane plus partial pressure of pentane, nothing but total pressure. So the pressure of pentane is 88 and hexane is 96. By substituting this and on simplifying, we can get 0.478. So the answer is fourth option, 0.478 is our correct answer. Now coming to the next one. An aqueous solution is 1 molal in Ki, which change will cause the vapor pressure of solution to increase. See, the vapor pressure is directly proportional to mole fraction of solvent and inversely proportional to number of moles of solid particles. In a given solution, if the number of solute particles are increased, that means the concentration of the solute increases, the vapor pressure decreases. If the solute particles are decreased per unit volume, then vapor pressure of solution increases. Here the asked question is, an aqueous solution is 1 molal in Ki which change will cause the vapor pressure of the solution to increase. So vapor pressure of solution should be increased. So vapor pressure should be increased. That means mole fraction of solute should be decreased. See, the given solution concentration is 1 molal. Now to this solution, if I add a solution which is having more concentration than to it, then number of solute particles per unit volume increases. That means the value of X increases. If value of X increases, vapor pressure decreases. So in case of first one, second one and third one, by adding these, number of solute particles per unit volume may increase or may remain same. So in case of first one, number of moles of solute particles of NaCl similar to 1 molal Ka solution. There is no change in vapor pressure. But in case of second and third option, the concentration of the solution what we added is more than the given concentration. So the resultant concentration increases. As concentration increases, the vapor pressure decreases. Now coming to the fourth one, addition of water. When water is added, the concentration of solution decreases. That is, the mole fraction of solute decreases. As a result, here the vapor pressure increases. So the answer is addition of water will increase the vapor pressure. Now come to the next one. Mass of glucose that would be dissolved in 50 grams of water to produce the same lowering of vapor pressure as produced by dissolving 1 gram of urea in the same quantity of water. So here the lowering of vapor pressure produced is same. Lowering of vapor pressure as produced should be same. That means delta P of glucose and delta P of urea should be same. If delta P is same, then mole fractions will be same. If mole fractions are same, then number of moles of the components will be same. So delta P glucose is equal to delta P urea. X, that is mole fraction of glucose is equal to mole fraction of urea, and mole fraction of that is number of moles of glucose is equal to number of moles of urea. Number of moles is nothing but mass by molecular mass. So mass of glucose we have to calculate. Molecular mass of glucose is 180. Mass of urea given is 1, and molecular mass of urea is 60. And if on simplifying, we will get a mass of glucose required is 3 grams. That is 3 grams of glucose when dissolved, we will get the same lowering in vapor pressure as when 1 gram of urea is dissolved in 50 grams of water. So our answer is second option. And come to the next one. Lowering of vapor pressure due to a solution in 1 molal aqueous solution at 100 degrees Celsius is. Here the given solution is 1 molal solution and the temperature given is 100 degrees Celsius. Vapor pressures are not given, but we know that 100 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of water. That is the temperature at which vapor pressure becomes equal to 1 atmosphere. Means that the vapor pressure of water at 100 degrees Celsius is equal to 1 atmosphere, which is nothing but equal to 760 mm of mercury. And the molality of solution given is 1 molal, means that 1 mole of solute is present in 1000 grams of water. So now if we calculate the mole fraction of solute, 1 mole of solute is present in 1000 grams of water. So number of moles of water is equal to 1000 by 18, and on simplifying this we will get mole fraction of solute as 0.0176. According to Raoult's law, we know that P naught minus P by P naught, which is a relative lowering of vapor pressure, is equal to mole fraction of solute. Then if you take P naught to here, then P naught minus P becomes equal to P naught into mole fraction of solute. The P naught is 760 mm of mercury, and mole fraction of solute what we calculate is 0.0176, and on multiplication of both these values we will get 13.4 millimeters. So the lowering of vapor pressure is nothing but 13.4 mm of Hg, and the first option is the correct answer. Next one, the mass of a non-volatile solute which should be dissolved in 114 grams of octane to reduce its vapor pressure to 80% will be. So vapor pressure is reduced to 80%. So let the initial pressure is 100 because percentage is given, and final pressure is 80, and mass of octane given here 1.114 grams of octane, and we have to calculate the mass of non-volatile solute. Now by substituting these values in a Raoult's law, first we will calculate a mole fraction of solute, that is 1000 minus 80 by 100 gives 0.2. So mole fraction of solute is 0.2. Then mole fraction of solvent will be 1 minus 0.2 because sum of the mole fractions is equal to 1. So mole fraction of solvent is 0.8. Then I will take the relation for mole fraction of solvent. Mole fraction of solvent is equal to moles of solvent by moles of solvent plus solute. By substituting the values here, if you simplify, you will get mass of octane which is required, which is equal to 10 grams. So our answer is 10 grams. Third option is the correct answer. Next one, 3 grams of urea is dissolved in 45 grams of water. The relative lowering of vapor pressure is. So according to Raoult's law, we know that relative lowering of vapor pressure is equal to mole fraction of solute, nothing but number of moles of solute by number of moles of solute plus solvent. Number of moles of solute, mass by molecular mass, 3 grams mass, 60 molecular mass, divided by number of moles of solute, and 45 is the mass of water, and molecular mass of water is 18. By substituting this, if you simplify, you will get 0.02. So our answer is the third option. And next one, an aqueous solution freezes at minus 0.186 degrees Celsius. The elevation of boiling point of the solution is. Kf values and Kb values are given. So here we can solve this in two different methods. The first one is delta Tf is equal to T naught F minus Tf. Freezing point of water is 0, and the elevation in freezing point of solution is 0.186. Then if you take the difference between those, we can get diffraction in freezing point. By substituting this diffraction in freezing point in this formula, delta Tf is equal to Kf into m, we will get molality 0.1 m. Now by using this molality, we can calculate elevation in boiling point. As you know that delta Tb is equal to Kb into m. Kb value is given here, molality we have calculated here. By substituting Kb value and molality value, we can get delta Tb value, which is 0.0512. The same problem we can solve in an alternate method by an easy method, which is nothing but the relation between delta Tb and delta Tf is delta Tb by delta Tf is equal to Kb by Kf. So here Kb value, Kf values are given, delta Tf is known. So by substituting these values directly in this relation and on simplifying, we can get 0.0512. So the answer is fourth option. And next one, which of the following solutions will exhibit a highest boiling point? See, the elevation in boiling point delta Tb is equal to I into Kb into m. The elevation of boiling point mainly depends on Van 't Hoff factor and molality of the solution. The product of these two can decide the elevation in boiling point. The solution which is having highest value of I into m has the highest boiling point, where I is Van 't Hoff factor, which is nothing but number of ions produced from one molecule. So if you take KTSO4, Van 't Hoff factor is 3 and given molality is 0.01, the number of moles of particles is 0.03. For KNO3, Van 't Hoff factor is 2 and molality given is 0.01, the number of moles of particles is 0.02. For urea, it is not non-electrolyte, so Van't Hoff factor is 1, so number of moles of particles is 0.015. Glucose is also non-electrolyte, so Van't Hoff factor is 1, number of moles of particles is 0.015. Now among all these, K2SO4 contains more number of solid particles. As the number of solid particles increases, elevation of boiling point increases. So the answer is K2SO4. So the first option is the answer. So this is in brief regarding the solid state and solutions chapters. Thank you one and all.